Her faith was all she had, and it became everything she needed. Imagine doing everything you know to do, praying every day, whispering every hope to God, trying to hold on with every bit of strength, and still, the world around you feels silent. That was me, sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the blank wall in my bedroom, wondering if anyone, even God, was listening. My name is Hannah Carter, and that night I felt completely alone. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes your heart sound louder than it should. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock, marking the hours that felt heavier than the moments before. Every second reminded me that nothing had changed. My prayers hadn't brought answers. My dreams hadn't moved forward, and the hope I had been clinging to felt like sand slipping through my fingers. I hugged my knees to my chest, trying to hold myself together. My thoughts raced in circles. Why is this so hard? Why am I still here, waiting? Am I doing something wrong? The questions didn't stop, and the silence around me only made them louder. Tears came, uninvited and unstoppable, streaming down my cheeks as I whispered into the empty room. God, I don't understand. I'm tired. I'm so tired. I remember thinking about everyone around me who seemed to have it all together, their lives smooth and predictable, their faith unshaken. And then I thought about me, the constant struggle to keep my hope alive, the fear that I wasn't enough, that my faith wasn't strong enough to carry me through. For the first time in a long time, I questioned whether my faith, the one thing I had always held tightly, could really be enough. The night dragged on. The shadows in my room stretched longer, the ticking clock louder, my heart heavier. I didn't know it yet, but this quiet, desperate moment was about to become the doorway to something I couldn't imagine. Before that night, life hadn't seemed so broken. I had a steady job, friends who cared, and a home I loved. On the surface, everything looked fine. But beneath the surface, the cracks were growing, and I had been ignoring them, pretending that everything was okay. It started with small disappointments. A project at work that didn't go as planned. A friendship that slowly faded, subtle health scares I tried to brush off. Each one alone might have been manageable, but together they piled up, and I didn't know how to handle it. I began to feel like I was carrying invisible weights everywhere I went, and every time I tried to reach out, life seemed to tighten its grip. I remember one evening, sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a half-finished cup of tea. I had been holding on, forcing myself to smile, to answer messages, to pretend I had it all together. But inside, I was exhausted. My faith felt like a flickering candle in a storm, barely holding its flame. I whispered to myself, is this all there is? Will it ever get better? Even my prayers had started to feel empty, rehearsed, as if God was somewhere far away, too busy to notice me. And yet, deep down, I couldn't stop praying. I couldn't stop hoping. That was the first sign that my faith, small as it felt, was still alive. Weeks passed and the heaviness didn't lift. Every morning I woke up with the same question lingering in my mind. When will this change? When will you answer, God? I tried to distract myself with work, errands, and conversations, but the waiting gnawed at me. It felt like I was trapped in a loop, unable to break free. One afternoon, I found myself walking aimlessly through the park. The crisp air brushed against my face, but it didn't ease the storm inside me. Children laughed nearby, couples held hands, and I felt like I was watching life through a glass wall I couldn't break. How could everyone else move forward while I felt stuck in a loop of doubt and fear? That day, I sat on a bench and let myself cry. Not just the surface tears, but the kind that come from the depths of your soul. My heart ached, and for the first time, I admitted that I was scared. Not just for what was happening, but for what might never happen. And yet, in the middle of that fear, I whispered a prayer. God, I don't know what to do, but I still trust you. It was a small, trembling declaration, barely audible over my sobs. But it mattered, because even when everything else was failing, my faith, fragile and persistent, was still clinging to him. The days became heavier. Sleep offered little relief, and anxiety clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I felt my energy drain, my hope shrink, and my confidence vanish. At times, I wondered if I had imagined God's presence all along. One night, I sat on the floor of my bedroom, back against the wall, knees drawn up, feeling smaller than I had ever felt. I replayed every disappointment, every delay, every unanswered prayer. Maybe I'm not meant to have this. Maybe I'm meant to stay here, waiting, broken. In that moment, I felt a shift, not in my circumstances, but in my heart. I realized that if I gave up, I would lose the one thing I had left, my faith. And even if it was trembling, even if it felt inadequate, it was still mine. I pressed my hands to my chest, closed my eyes, and whispered, "I can't see you, but I believe you are here. I will hold on." It was the darkest hour, and yet, paradoxically, it was the moment that faith began to spark a light I couldn't yet see. I had surrendered not because I had answers, but because I had no other choice. And surrender, I would later learn, was the very key to the miracle about to come. The breakthrough didn't come with fanfare. There were no lightning bolts or dramatic signs. It came quietly, in a way that I almost missed. I had opened my Bible, more out of habit than hope, and my eyes fell on a verse I had read countless times before. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." The words struck me like a lifeline. I felt a warmth in my chest, a gentle reminder that my struggles weren't a sign of abandonment. They were the stage for something greater. My heart, still trembling, lifted slightly. A whisper of hope crept in, fragile but undeniable. I spent the rest of the night reading, praying differently this time, not demanding answers, not bargaining, but listening. For the first time in months, I felt a quiet presence, as if God was sitting with me, saying, "I see you. I am here. You are not alone." And in that presence, I began to understand something profound. My faith, though small and tested, was exactly what I needed. It was enough to hold on, enough to endure, and enough to see that even the darkest nights eventually give way to dawn. The morning after that quiet whisper of hope, I woke up feeling different, not healed, not victorious, but aware. Aware that something inside me had shifted. I got out of bed slowly, almost cautiously, afraid the fragile peace would disappear if I moved too fast. But by afternoon, the familiar heaviness began to settle again. The doubts returned, whispering their old lies. "Nothing has changed. You're still stuck. Your faith is too small." I sat at my desk and rested my head in my hands. I had always been the strong one, the friend everyone leaned on, the one who prayed boldly for others, the one who smiled even when life didn't make sense. But now, my strength wasn't enough. And strangely, accepting that didn't feel like defeat. It felt like truth. I leaned back in my chair and whispered, "Lord, I don't know how to walk through this, but I trust you. Please just help me take the next step." And for the first time, I didn't feel pressure to be strong. I just felt a quiet permission to rest in him. A few days later, while shopping for groceries, I ran into an elderly woman I had never seen before. She walked up to me with such gentle confidence that I froze. "My dear," she said, touching my arm lightly, "I don't know what you're carrying, but God wants you to know He has not forgotten you." My breath caught. Tears rushed to my eyes before I could stop them. I had never seen this woman in my life. Before I could ask how she knew, she simply smiled, nodded, and walked away. That moment replayed in my mind for days. It wasn't loud. It wasn't miraculous in the way I expected, but it pierced the fog around me. Someone, somehow, had spoken directly into the deepest question of my heart. "God, have you forgotten me?" His answer had walked right up to me in the produce aisle. The encounter strengthened me, but it didn't erase the struggle. My nights were still long, my thoughts still tangled. But now, beneath all the noise, a stubborn thread of hope began to weave itself through my days. One night, after another wave of anxiety washed over me, I sat on the floor again, hugging a pillow tightly. The tears came, but this time they were different. They weren't hopeless. They were cleansing. "God," I whispered, "I don't understand why this is happening. I don't know why the breakthrough hasn't come, but I trust you, even when it hurts." It wasn't poetic, it wasn't strong. It was raw, honest, real. And for the first time, I felt my faith fighting, not with loud declarations, but with quiet persistence. It happened slowly, almost quietly, like dawn gradually pushing back the night. I began waking up with gratitude for small things: the sunlight on my window, the sound of birds in the morning, the warmth of my coffee. I started journaling again, not about my problems, but about God's goodness, things I had overlooked while carrying my burdens. Something inside me was changing. I wasn't waiting anxiously for God to move, I was expecting Him to. I wasn't questioning His presence, I was noticing it. I realized that healing wasn't always a sudden miracle. Sometimes it was a gentle shift of the heart, a returning to trust, a realigning of hope, a softening of fear. Little by little, the darkness inside me began to lose its grip. This was where the real transformation began. One afternoon, while praying, I felt something break, like a wall collapsing inside me. The heavy knot in my chest loosened. The fear that had clung to me for months finally began to dissolve. I didn't hear a voice, I didn't see a vision, but I felt peace. A deep, steady, unmistakable peace that wrapped around me like a blanket. I cried not from fear this time, but from relief, from gratitude, from the sudden realization that God had been working all along, even when I couldn't see it. My faith wasn't just surviving anymore, it was rising. In the days that followed, I found myself walking with a confidence I hadn't felt in months. Not the old, self-built confidence that relied on my strength, but a quiet, unshakable assurance rooted in Him. I prayed with expectation. I worshipped with sincerity. I spoke to God as if He were beside me, because I finally believed He was. The circumstances around me hadn't fully changed yet. The answers I prayed for hadn't appeared instantly, but something far greater had shifted. My heart had learned to trust God again. I wasn't held together by fear or desperation anymore. I was held together by faith, steady, persistent, deeply rooted faith that refused to give up. And for the first time, I truly understood what the woman in the grocery store meant. God had never forgotten me. He was simply preparing me. The first unexpected shift came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was washing dishes, humming quietly, something I hadn't done in months, when my phone buzzed. The message was simple. "Hannah, I've been thinking about you. Are you available for something new?" It was from an old acquaintance I hadn't spoken to in ages. I stared at the message, unsure whether to smile or cry. It wasn't a big breakthrough, not yet, but it felt like a door cracking open, letting in the first beam of light. For months, nothing had moved. Everything felt stuck. But suddenly, here was movement, gentle, small, but unmistakable. I whispered, "Lord, is this you?" Peace washed over me again, that same quiet assurance that had been weaving itself into my days. It wasn't about the opportunity itself, it was about what it represented. God was turning things, slowly, quietly, faithfully. And I realized something powerful. Sometimes the miracle starts with small shifts that tell your heart, God is working. In the following weeks, my life began to rebuild, not in dramatic leaps, but in steady steps. My mind felt clearer. My prayers felt alive. My heart felt lighter. One afternoon, I took a walk in the same park where I had cried on that bench months earlier. But this time, everything looked different. The trees seemed fuller, the air softer, the sky brighter. Or maybe I was different. I sat on the same bench, ran my fingers over its wooden edge, and whispered, "Thank you for not leaving me here." I thought back to all those nights when I begged God to show up. I didn't realize He had been showing up all along, strengthening me, restoring me, rebuilding what I thought I had lost. Faith wasn't just helping me survive anymore, it was helping me see. And what I saw now was a woman rising from the ashes, not because her circumstances changed, but because her heart did. Courage didn't come to me in a loud burst. It came like a soft tide, slowly covering the shoreline of my fears. I started taking steps I had avoided for months. I revisited dreams I packed away in discouragement. I reached out to people I had withdrawn from. Every step felt like standing on water, but somehow I didn't sink. One evening, I stood at my window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. I whispered, "Lord, I feel you. I finally feel you again." I realized courage was not the absence of fear. It was trusting God enough to move despite fear. That night, I wrote in my journal, Faith doesn't always remove the mountain. Sometimes it strengthens your legs to climb it. And in that moment, I knew my climb had begun. The miracle didn't explode into my life. It unfolded, piece by piece, woven with gentleness. One evening, after a long day, I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling. My heart felt different, strong, steady, whole. I couldn't explain it. Nothing big had happened yet. But inside me, something miraculous was taking shape. The storm had lost its power over me. I woke up each morning with joy. Real joy. Not the fragile kind held together by circumstances, but the kind rooted in a God who never left my side, even when I felt alone. My prayers shifted from pleading to thanking. My tears shifted from pain to relief. My heart shifted from fear to expectation. I felt God's love in everything: sunlight, conversations, worship songs, even silence. And quietly, deeply, I knew the miracle had already begun in me. One Sunday, while sitting in church, I closed my eyes during worship. The music swelled, voices lifted, and something in my spirit broke free. I felt a warmth rush through me, gentle but overwhelming. I lifted my hands, not out of routine but out of surrender, out of gratitude, out of awe. I whispered, "Thank you for not letting me go. Thank you for turning my brokenness into strength. Thank you for teaching me that faith is enough." When I opened my eyes, everything looked new. Not because the world had changed, but because I had. I walked out of that service with a heart fully alive, fully anchored, fully restored. The woman who once sat in darkness now walked in confidence, not in herself, but in the God who had carried her through every silent, shattering night. It wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new one. The breakthrough didn't come with thunder. It came with a whisper. One morning, months after my night of despair, I received a message that made my heart stop. It was an opportunity I had prayed for quietly, secretly, when no one was looking. Something I had almost given up on entirely. I stared at the message, reading it over and over. "We've reviewed your application. We would love to have you come on board." My hands trembled, my eyes blurred with tears. This wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was the answer I had been waiting for, arriving in God's quiet, perfect timing. I sank to my knees beside my bed, unable to speak. The same room where I once questioned whether God even heard me now became the place I felt him most tangibly. Not in a loud miracle, not in a dramatic encounter, but in a gentle, undeniable yes. And in my spirit, I heard this soft assurance. I was working all along. The days that followed felt like stepping into sunlight after a long winter. Every moment shimmered with gratitude. I felt like someone who had survived a storm and could finally smell the earth after the rain. What amazed me wasn't just the breakthrough. It was who I had become along the way. Fear no longer dictated my steps. Doubt no longer whispered lies that I believed. And the heaviness that once suffocated me had been replaced with peace that felt unshakable. I found myself praying differently, not begging God to move, but thanking him for how he already had. I realized the wonder wasn't just in the blessing I received, but in the faith being built inside me. One evening, sitting near my window with the cool breeze brushing through my curtains, I whispered, "Lord, you really were in every detail." The wonder of that truth stayed with me like a warm light. I didn't plan to share my story. In fact, I thought I would keep most of it tucked quietly inside, just between God and me. But God had other plans. People around me started noticing the change. My smile was brighter. My steps lighter. My voice calm, in a way it hadn't been for months. "What happened to you?" a friend asked one afternoon. "You look renewed." I paused, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what to say. "God carried me," I replied. "Even when I didn't feel him, even when I thought my faith was too small, he never left." As I spoke, I felt something stir inside me, something bold, something alive. My story wasn't meant to be hidden. It was meant to be shared. Because someone else out there was sitting on their bed in the dark, asking the same questions I once asked. God, are you still here? Have you forgotten me? And they needed to know, He is closer than you think, and He never forgets. Telling my story didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel grateful. Deeply, overwhelmingly grateful. Because I had lived through the valley, and now I could look back and see Jesus in every shadow. I stood in my room one night, the same place where my journey began, and whispered into the quiet, Lord, thank you for turning my breaking point into my testimony. And now, as I share this story, I want to speak to the heart that feels exactly how I once felt, tired, forgotten, overwhelmed, running on fragile faith. Your faith may feel small, but God's power is not. Your hope may feel weak, but His hands are strong enough to hold you. Your night may feel endless, but dawn always comes. If He carried me through the silence, the struggle, and the waiting, He will carry you too. He is still working wonders today, quietly, faithfully, perfectly. And now I invite you, share your own testimony, big or small, in the comments. You never know who your story might lift up. And if this journey touched you, strengthened you, or reminded you that God still moves, subscribe for more faith-filled stories of hope, redemption, and the unstoppable love of Jesus. Because someone out there is waiting for the reminder you carry. And you just might be the voice God uses.